this episode of Inside Ice, I'm joined by Damian Ashton-Wellman, who is responsible for pulling together the conference programme for ICE. So, Damien, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Robin. It's no small feat.
Yeah. And just to take a step back, I'm always curious, and I've been asking people this a lot in this series. How did you end up at Clarion? Like, what kind of brought you into this whole world?
So I kind of fell into events by accident, really. So when I was back at university, I wanted to be a TV producer, and so I was kind of building towards that, kind of studying media production, marketing and PR, and film studies alongside that. And so kind of as I was looking for my in into the TV industry, I was looking for the different routes to go through, and I started volunteering with the Royal Television Society, which, like BAFTA, was one of the main trade associations for the UK industry. I'd gone to an event through kind of a course at university, met someone from the organising committee. They asked me to stick around afterwards. I was like, oh, this could be an interesting route to actually kind of build some contacts. And so I kind of started kind of just working as an event runner, really, helping with setup for the venue. Then kind of after I graduated, I was invited to actually join the programming committee for the London region for the RTS, kind of building industry events in kind of my free time, kind of screenings for up and coming series, looking at kind of, and then also panels looking at kind of big industry topics. So I did that kind of on the sideline while I was focusing in on kind of my core kind of post-production work. So kind of most of the TV industry is led by freelancers. So I was going from various different projects to project, documentaries, then decided I kind of wanted to actually work a little bit more on the business side. I'd already been interested in the producing more so than the technical side. Went back to do my MA in international media business, and then COVID hit just as I was graduating. So, a lot of the freelance work had dried up, but what was actually coming up at that time for the event industry was online events. And so I had that production and editing experience from my work in the TV industry, plus I knew how to produce events. So I ended up having quite a lot of work kind of virtualizing event conferences, awards, kind of really building connections across the kind of wider TV ecosystem with a lot of the associations that were also producing events in broadcast sport, diversity. So did that, and then kind of actually went back into industry in a sales role for a post-production house for a couple of years. And then back in, I think it was 2023, I was approached by just a headhunter random call saying, hey, found your CV. And it was an old CV from a couple of years ago somewhere. They had this event role from Coherent Events, never heard of it before. Slightly intrigued. Slowly they kept kind of like telling me more about what I'd be doing, working in the gaming industry. Initially I thought video games, I think a lot of people do, but actually kind of when I started kind of digging deeper into it, I found like the iGaming industry was just really interesting, kind of broader gaming as well. There's so much convergence from the entertainment field, from game design through to actually the hospitality and immersive experiences on the land-based sector. So I was intrigued. And I think there was really this kind of like, this was kind of a few months before the announcement came of the move to Barcelona. So they'd already started to kind of tease out a little bit of kind of what was going on. And so kind of be part of this team kind of reinventing what was an 88-year-old event proposition. That was kind of really interesting. So took the role, worked on the last ICE in London, kind of in a very support role, producing the World Regulatory Briefing, starting to build out some of our content. Little did I know I'd end up actually running all of our content during the move for last year. And yeah, that's kind of really how I ended up here.
Wow, so you started off in TV, so imagine big egos, a lot of complexity, and organised chaos a lot of the time. I mean, I was going to ask you about transferable skills, but I mean, I think
Exactly.
I think that kind of answers it, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, actually, there's a lot of transferable skills from the entertainment industry into gaming. It's been so interesting. Kind of so many of the executives I've been talking to, they have some level of entertainment background as well. Look like Entain, they've gone from Modern Times Group, also DAZN as well, and so I think, yeah, it's a really interesting space.
Yeah, and I imagine that something like the World Gaming Forum, it must be a bit of a kind of a high wire act because you look at the industry today, and it encompasses a lot, from white to grey to maybe something slightly darker, and then a lot of different kind of like, biases, competing views. And how do you go about kind of taking this sort of hurricane of contrasting opinions, needs, kind of like demands, and crafting that into something like a coherent narrative?
I think it really is a challenge. Like, ICE in general is a beast to work on. I think it's the only show that actually unites the entire ecosystem globally across land, online, all the different sub verticals. And like the content isn't just one thing either. So, kind of when you think about ICE, the content at ICE, we've got the show floor, we've got our premium conferences, there's all sorts of partner and association content happening, and that all needs to be woven into a cohesive kind of narrative. And like, my job is ultimately to control that chaos as much as possible. And so kind of really like my starting point before I even address like the issues of kind of bias and contrasting opinions is actually kind of building the community. So our approach to content is very much about building content around communities where there's a need for some level of content solution to serve. So we won't just do content for the sake of it. We'll actually validate and go out and find where there is a community that we can bring together to kind of solve an issue, whether that be innovation in the land-based sector, regulation in online gaming, marketing and CX, cybersecurity, entering new markets. And so we focus primarily on our paid conferences, building this summit structure so that we're going after content that has a kind of shared narrative around what they're looking after. And then we kind of contrast that with the summits, look at strategy and policy. Our show floor content focuses on the technical implementations that a lot of our exhibitor vendors can actually help with, and then we'll weave in the partner content as it's needed. So, for instance, we partner with the Indian Gaming Association, so they'll run their own content for their members targeting the show. We've got similar partnerships in Latin America and Africa as well, and so kind of the focus has really been to kind of build out that structure in a way that has clear narratives to different people. So if you're just visiting the show floor to meet to kind of find solutions, actually our show floor theatres are the perfect way to see the exhibitors that are actually doing really interesting things, because there's still like a large part of our content is editorial driven. So you get a chance to really see what's driving the innovation in the sector. But then if you're that C-level audience that's coming to the show, or regulators, we provide a more enhanced experience. And so that's kind of how we've gone about it. I think, at the same time, ultimately, on competing views, we love debate. Like, good content is where there are different perspectives there. And so one of the formats we do for this is, as part of our paid conferences, we have a lot of roundtable discussions, either in kind of closed door boardroom formats or actually peer-to-peer roundtables in the rooms themselves. And that's designed exactly to kind of bring those debates together. For this year as well, like, we've introduced Chatham House rule, excluding press from the World Regulatory Briefing, which is the single largest gathering of regulators we do, in order to help create that kind of real dialogue between different stakeholders. And then really kind of in terms of kind of how we approach bias, that just comes from the research process. Okay,
interesting. And I'm curious, actually. I mean, like, I suppose this is a bit of an inexact science, but I mean, within this kind of framework, I mean, who would you say are the most valuable speakers? I mean, like, who do you see audiences kind of particularly engaging with? Like, is it really just the most senior person in the room, or is it more kind of like on how they present themselves?
I think there's a nuance in it. So kind of like looking at it broadly, regulators, out of industry tech vendors, and the CEOs definitely help bring people into the room, but they're looking for kind of the right voices and the right combinations as well. So I think it's not necessarily the most senior person in the room, but it is the person that is actually doing the work that does kind of drive. And the more deep you can get into the subject matter, and that the more insight that speaker has, that really kind of drives a lot of engagement. So this year we're on track to bring over 400 regulators to the show, and so across our speakers, we've got Mike Dritzer from Nevada, we've got Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Botswana, Italy, the UKGC. So we're providing that kind of touch point for people to find out the latest regulatory updates and kind of where the change is happening globally. We've got people like Ian Hunter, the head of real money gaming for Snapchat, which I think is a really interesting kind of type of speaker to bring in. Talking about fan engagement and bridging the gap between kind of betting and kind of wider entertainment sector. Now, for a company like Snapchat to have a dedicated vertical for gambling, pretty much, I think that is something that's really kind of I've not seen before, and so actually being able to bring these voices to the show really helps. And then also, kind of looking at the CEOs in the industry, we're not just going after the most conventional kind of same name every year. We're looking for something that feeds the narrative of what people want. So one of the things to come out of our research this year was around kind of the convergence of sports into casinos and kind of building successful omnichannel operations. So we've got people like Sue Kim, the CEO for Bally's, Shay Segev, CEO of DAZN as well, kind of bringing these, kind of in and out of industry voices, Leo Vegas, FDJ, all talking about the legal market as well. So I think it's a balance really of kind of senior voices, but a diverse pool from which we choose them from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel the conference, like, especially last year, it felt like it was starting to evolve, and part of that, obviously, over the past 2 years, we've had Nadine de Reza kind of join as sort of like an anchor for the event, so you see a bit of that TV programming style approach kind of coming in there. I mean, like, I'm curious, like, about the nature of conferences, really. I mean, do you feel what people want from them is starting to kind of like shift and evolve?
I think this is one of the things that I end up spending far too much time thinking about really at the moment, and generally kind of since the move to Barcelona. There's just so many conferences in the gaming sector now. I think I worked out that it's pretty much one every 2 weeks when you look at iGaming calendar.
Yeah.
Content plays such an important role in kind of the ecosystem events in the industry. Even if you are trade show focused as ICE is, the content often acts as the kind of the key to the approvals process of getting the right people to attend the show. If they're just coming to buy products, you get a very specific audience. But actually you need that wider ecosystem. The content is there. Content ultimately functions for 3 purposes. It's there to market, to have big names to bring people into the show. It's there to educate and in the right formats also entertain it as well. And I think kind of the move to Barcelona, changing our date structure, has kind of really opened us up to look how we're doing things and actually start to ask the question, just because we did it before, is it the way to kind of continue to do it? So one of the things I've noticed are audiences are increasingly transient. We need to balance ensuring that sessions are full, just so that speakers feel that there's value for them being on stage, and that actually we are providing value to as many people as possible in the room. But gone is the day of spending 8 hours back to back in every single session. People are much more likely to coming to the sessions they want, see maximum 20% of the actual program alongside their other engagements and meetings. So I think one of the things that we need to be kind of asking ourselves a lot more about is actually, how do we provide the flexibility to kind of target as many different communities while still building that hub to give them a home at the show? And so I think that is definitely changing, and people are also looking more and more for kind of peer-to-peer interaction as well, and actually having a solution from it. So it's not just coming to see a panel and a presentation. I mean, there is a need for that content for sure, but they also want to balance that with making new connections and having the time to network as well. So trying to fit all of that into 3 days is really kind of my biggest challenge at the moment, and something that we've talked about offline. It's something that we continue to look at and evolve for 27. But I'm kind of reminded of something that a friend in PR kind of told me. CEOs, keep it simple, stupid. KISS. That's the approach, really. And I think kind of ICE is definitely in the right track for that. We've got engaging content this year. We've focused on refining and kind of shortening and tightening the content in, so that people have the option to go to the sessions they want to, and then still have enough time for lunch and meetings, breakfast and meetings, afternoon breaks and meetings. We provide them with the lounge access as well, and kind of really create it so it's not just coming to the content. You're buying as part of a ticket and an overall experience. It's your networking pass, it's your content pass, it's your club, like an airport lounge. And I think that's really been something that Barcelona has allowed us to kind of tap into more.
I suppose that's kind of is kind of expanding, like you talked about, bringing different communities together around key themes, and I suppose that's kind of providing that kind of like physical manifestation of that.
It is, and I think when you look at the content we're doing, like we're going to those different needs, so kind of coming back to market, to educate, to entertain. We've got that across our content. So, to market, we've got these industry leading keynotes to open the discussions. To educate, we've got content like the World Regulatory Briefing to actually bring together the peer-to-peer understanding and stakeholder engagement between the regulators and the operators. Then we've got our enterprise stage on the show floor, looking at kind of the more entertaining aspects of, kind of hackathon style content, our pitch competition. So I think it's making sure that we've got those different touch points across the program.
Of course. And then I think we've touched on them on a few of these going through, but I mean, like beyond the illegal market, modernising the land-based sector, I mean, what other kind of key themes are you seeing kind of like emerge, or even ones that you feel are going to emerge over the course of next year?
Well, I think kind of like the obvious one is the issue with the legal markets, and really where the industry stands on this. Like increasingly, I feel like there's being a line drawn in the sand. You're either on it or you're on the wrong side. And that's kind of a very tricky position to navigate in terms of kind of where that line is, because you're seeing on the one side the tier one operators very much kind of being under threat from one side from government policy. Then there's also kind of the threat from kind of unlicensed offshore operators. And I think for me, the kind of the issue around this is, how do you bring the ecosystem together when there is a growing divide? And so I think in terms of kind of where I see that going in the next couple of years, I think there really is kind of, it reminds me a lot of kind of my experience from kind of the TV industry. And like, you can remember from like the 90s, and I'm far too young for that, but you can remember from the 90s for some of from our listeners, the kind of the piracy debate around kind of film and TV, when you used to see those videos with the branded guy steal a video. That sort of feels like gaming's having that moment at the moment. So I think that's going to continue to kind of be a hot debate. But kind of beyond kind of the other topics around like land-based and kind of convergence in sports betting, one of the things that's been really quite interesting this year is actually looking at the lottery sector. So like the lottery is being reevaluated in its overall position within the wider gaming market. Like traditionally, it's always been seen as its own thing, separate from the wider ecosystem. But increasingly, regulators are starting to look more at lottery providers as they're starting to converge and buy into sports betting and iGaming assets. They now want to look at that kind of the crossover and how actually the overall lottery groups are regulated. Cybersecurity, of course, is also a big issue, and kind of the increasing fraud. So topics like bonus abuse have started to work their way into the agenda as well. But I think there's kind of quite a diverse number of issues at the moment.
And then just to finish, best ICE moment, worst ICE moment.
Best ICE moment was last year, working with Vicente Fox, the former president of Mexico, one of the nicest men you could meet. So pro-industry, knew what he was talking about as well, and generally, opened up, quite some interesting topics around kind of the wider economic value that gaming can bring to economies in emerging markets. So yeah, that's my best moment. My worst moment, oh God, I think that depends on on the day, really. To be honest, I don't think there has actually been, a genuinely bad moment since I've been working on Ice. Like, it's a very challenging timeline, pretty much like with a two-person team kind of pulling together, 400 plus speakers across, God knows how many hours of content. And so I think, there's definitely the days when you look at it and think, is this going to come together? And definitely have those. But kind of there's nothing better than being on site and just kind of seeing the buzz of everything around you, and that takes away and really removes the kind of puts the kind of bad side in perspective.
Well, Damien, thank you very much and the very best of luck with the final prep.
Thank you, Robin.